the consciousness at the moment of death can determine the re-entry trajectory. That's why people in the Dark Ages that were tortured by the church at that moment of death were bonded with them for lifetimes. Bonded with them. They ended up marrying the people that tortured them, or vice versa, or the priest who tortured the woman ended up marrying her in the next life, and she tortured him. There's this energy payback going on all the time. So you really aren't looking for Jane Doe, and if they aren't mating, your energy is going to go when it's time, and it's very natural, by the way, until you get to a high level of consciousness. Your energy is going to go to the closest energy matrix that fits your, and you are immediately going to project on them the past memory. You're going to, and especially if you're a metaphysician, you're going to think, oh, you were my parent in a past life. Well, that's a good metaphor. And it's your projection, and that's okay and beautiful, and you can look at it that way. But basically, the likelihood is unlikely that that happens, although you get caught up in the same energy matrix bloodlines and things like that. Now, the other thing that happens is that when the subtle energy enters the body, it brings in with it all the memory that it has accumulated over the ages, and all the programs, all the karma, whatever you want to call it, and re-imprints it in the new cellular body. And we call that cellular memory, and we have lots of cellular memory to deal with. There are lots of good techniques on clearing cellular memory. If you're doing psychiatry or psychology and you're not working on cellular memory also, just the mind, you're not going to have that great of results. You've got to clear the cells too. And what we have found is photonics is one of the great systems for clearing cellular memory. It's very interesting. It's very, very interesting indeed. Because as memory goes into the cells, your cells are bipolar, positive or negative. If the experience was negative, it goes into bipolar mode. If it was positive, it goes into positive mode in the cellular memory. Now, the only way to access that is to get into that mode, say, be happy. Or if someone makes you angry, you may trip into that cellular memory, and that whole anger then comes out. Then, you ever seen when you get somebody angry, the whole stream all of a sudden comes out? That's because you've hit that. Now, what photonics and what some of the scientists we've worked with have said is what it seems to, and we're going to really look deep into this, what seems to be happening is that photonics and certain wavelengths of energy tend to clear the effect by the polar thing. Now, what's interesting is that you don't lose the memory, you lose the negative charge on the memory. Because all memory is important experience, but losing the negative charge on it is what heals you. You see what I'm saying? So I get real technical that way. But to answer your reincarnation question, it's very simple stuff. And once we understand it, it's going to become even more exciting, because then you can fully consciously participate in your reentry. And that's why the moment of death and death centers should be set up everywhere so that you can have the perfect attitude, environment to make the transition, and your incarnations are going to be very different than if you're alone, scared, fearful, and all that when it happens. Because that moment of death is so important to the re-entry, no matter what all your other issues might be. Mm-hmm.
Will it have any effect on insect bites and itching?
Yeah, that's not one of our specialties, but we've had a lot of results on that. I had a spider bite, and it took care of it pretty good. Yeah. So we've seen it has this antihistamine effect, which is good. I mean, taking out the histamine. And so, although that's not our main market, we think it's very good for that in many cases. It also, photonics depends on the energy level you already have in your body. When we use photonics and you get a really big reaction the first time, it means you were pretty bad off and didn't know it. Whenever you get a big reaction, there was a big energy shift, and something was healing or going on. And then if you keep using it, you'll find out by the third or fourth session, all that's gone away and your energy stabilized at a higher level. And most of the researchers we work with in the different research institutions say that that's just what they're looking for. They're looking for a modality that's going to work within 3 to 4 sessions. That's what they're looking for these days, not something you have to use forever. And we fit that category very well at this time. Okay. Way over here against, okay. Yeah, it's very advanced stuff, though. There are some shamans that can do it. I have done personal experiments in this. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I hadn't been repeating the questions. Jeez. What was your question again, please? I'm not sure I got the whole thing.
It was, can you transcend and take your, this is in a brief context, can you transcend into your subtle body?
You into the subtle energy realm? Not in any way that I've seen on the other side. Oh yeah. He wanted to know that if you could do the reverse, take your physical body into the subtle energy realm with you. You can take your consciousness. You are more subtle energy than physical energy. Your real body is your nuclear body, your subtle energy body, and that's your main body that transcends time and space and all of that sort of thing. The physical body, wonderful as it is, we are learning to sustain it now. And give it more and more life, to the point of which we can regenerate it probably for as long as you want to in the future. But the whole point about not taking the body into the subtle realm is that, and those of you who have been in spirit may know this feeling, that when you're in spirit, you're very scattered. You're wherever you think you want to be. If you want to be with your mother, you're there. If you want to be in Egypt, you're there. Boom, 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 boom. That's what I found spirit being like. They're just all over the place. The body gives you the focus. The body is the focus between the macrocosm and the microcosm. The body is what brings heaven to earth. Believe me, this is where it's at, bringing heaven to earth. And the big struggle in my life since I've been back is the concept of the sacred and the mundane coming together in my life. And I saw that that's what's happening in the species and in our evolution now, is that we're learning to bring the sacred and the mundane together, or that time immemorial quest of bringing heaven to earth. That's what our body is for. It's not for doing the opposite. So the nature has a natural order of things. And though someone may be able to do that, I've never heard of it. It may be possible. I'm not saying anything's impossible. But the natural order of things in the Gaia is about getting into body, not getting out of body. In fact, when you say the other side, to me, it means the other side of life. It's the other side of life. And the whole thing about so above, so below relates. The thought form is alive and rich and continuing to evolve on its own with us at the same time. So, and you may know that the Germans and others are having this spirit communication now with dead people on television and all that sort of thing. And I've actually worked with the Germans on this, and we've got them on TV. So the gate is opening. The gate is really opening. And when I was talking to the Germans, I was saying, now when we open this gate, it's going to let everything come in. And there's not only good on the other side, there's weird stuff too. It's the full range. So the Germans being very technical, I suggested, why don't we have an electronic gatekeeper? I think we need to work on one of those, before we just open up the gate and say, come on in. I mean, let's have a little filter on there, please. Yes. It's easy when you understand the physics of it. The question is, again, why there seem to be spirits hanging around after they died? With ghosts, yeah. Very interesting. Yeah, right. What can happen in that case, in the physics of it, is that depending on the emotional body at the time of death, if you aren't ready, your subtle body is going to hang around. And the force of will can extend that. The trick is that you're out of time as we know it. So there is no time. So I'll give you an example. You're someone who built a dream house. You moved in and you died after all this time to build your dream house. You don't want to leave. So you hang around. You're not ready. The force of will is quite interesting with humans. So you want to hang around. But you're out of time and space, and suddenly the family leaves, which means 20 years may have gone by, they grow old and moved. Suddenly, strangers move in an instant, and they're moving everything around, and you get angry, and you start knocking stuff around yourself, saying, get out of my house. A couple hundred years could go by in that scenario before you realize or are ready to let go. You see what I'm saying? Because you're out of time and space. They don't know that awful lot of time is going by down in this temporal world.
They know that, like when I was living there, the door would open and close like 50 times.
Mhm.
That's not normal. No one would sit there and do that. I don't keep playing with the door.
You hear it all the time with ghosts.
Doing that
Yeah.
to get you scared to leave.
Because they don't want you there. So you have to make peace with them or get them to go. And there's many people that talk to them and tell them to go to the light. That's the, tell them to go to the light, finish your path.
If they don't want to go, they're going to stay.
You must want them there then, because you can get them to go fairly easy. It's a very easy energy to deal with, actually. So there must be some connection. You must like it in some way, or there's some connection there. Because if you didn't, you could actually clear it. So you moved out. Well, that's one way of clearing it. Clear out. I've done that. I'm not into big fights. If they're more powerful than me, I'm getting out of town. They can have the house. Yeah.
Were you given any information on the species on other systems, other planets?
Very much so. When the universe opened up to me, when I had the supernova of the soul, I instantly was aware of all the other life in the universe. And the universe is crawling with life. I mean, just of all types, everywhere. And the interesting thing is that the higher evolved life forms, or beings, intelligent beings and all that, don't send out spaceships. They don't interfere. You may come to them, but they're not out to convert anybody. They're not out to save anybody like the Palladians. We got to save you humans. You're lost. You need 12 DNA like ours. What you see in the UFOs that have done weird things is the lower forms, even though they may have technology evolved slightly beyond ours or whatever. Most of the life in the universe is super respectful. All of it is, by the way. And oddly enough, some of the abduction stuff, and forgive me for saying this, but most of it's self-generated, and I can go into a whole thing about that. But some of it that has happened periodically, the abductions and the sampling of tissue, is by a species that their religion, their manifest destiny, is to go through the universe and mix with everybody. So to them, they're not doing anything bad. They're actually just doing something wonderful. But to a scared human that's happened to, ouch! You know what I mean? It's kind of a frightening experience because they don't understand, and also there are these people that say, well, they've been here since the 40s studying our DNA, and I said, well, they must be stupid if they haven't figured it out by now. Slice me a break. I guess there are some stupid UFOs out there, some dummies. So, yes?
My question is a little different. It's about the issue you talked about selfishness, the fact that there's abundance, and something.
Well, somebody asked me once, what's the problem with our children? Why are they shooting at us? I said, they're trying to get our attention. Get it? We need to give a go-to-the-moon project budget and attention to our children. It's one of the number one things that I can tell you that I'm about and people I'm with are about. Most of the homeless are women and children, you see. But we're at a young stage where we're all still fighting over our stack of cookies, so you have this wealth discriminancy when there's enough abundance for everybody in this world, but only a mature being, as we're evolving into, will be able to implement that. What I am saying is that our children are going to continue to act out until we come back to them. Now, this happened because it had to. We all had to get involved in the Industrial Revolution to get humanity up to a point where we could sustain an optimal density population on the planet of around 8 billion. Now, we've all invested all of our lives in this, but part of the price we paid in bringing people off the farm was taking them out of the family, which was good. I think it was very good to break up the traditional family from what I've seen, because you were trapped for most of the part, for a lot of the time. But then the wife had to start going to work. Remember that? There was a time when a lot of women didn't work. Then it became traditional for the wife. And so We lost our parenting skills over a few generations. We have literally lost our parenting skills for the most part. We're going to have to learn it again, but we will, believe me. Our children are going to bring it back to us. And oddly enough, it's going to be more the elderly folks that teach it back to us again. It's almost like the grandparent-child thing. Those two generations are going to get together. Us in the middle are going to be still a little bit selfish for a little bit longer till we find ourselves. But basically, we're one of the worst countries in the world for children. Let's face it, Americans. We're a bunch of hypocrites on children. I mean, come on now. With our wealth and abundance, the money we're spending on children is atrocious for school and new types of education. And what happened in the Industrial Revolution is we had to invest so much energy and time in this that, for the most part, most of the couples that are working that have children that I know, the wife's paycheck just goes for daycare. To have a stranger raise your child. Isn't that kind of weird? We should have a national policy that every working family can have free daycare. I mean, that should be a national policy. You should not have to have that stress, and we're going to solve that problem. The other thing, too, is that a lot of children incarnating now, have you noticed how smart they are? Wow. I mean, big time. This relates to what I saw on the other side, that it's not the individual intelligence. It's the group. The more people we have on the planet, the more brain cells we have. And I've done graphs with scientists that as the population grows, we get wiser and wiser and more stable, not unstable, if you really know the history of the past. I'll give you an example. Recently, a report was done on the murder rate in Los Angeles. Okay? Now, for the fourth year in a row, violent crime has been down in America. Are you following this trend? I mean, it's being reported by police departments. Violent crime is going down. I know why. Because we're getting wiser. Whether we know it or not. Every time a human was born, we get one more brain cell. And it doesn't matter what that brain cell is doing. The importance is that it's here with us. In the future, it's not what you do. People are awed by your presence. The importance of you being here with us is what they love and respect and cherish you for. Not what you can do, not what kind of money you have. That's pointless after a point. After a certain point in the near future, it becomes pointless. What becomes important is quality of life, connectedness, and synergy. So we really, really need to invest a lot of time in our children and learn our parenting skills again, and they will build the non-industrial future for us. And get this, I try to remind people that these children are going to be your parents one day. Think about that when you look at a kid, your kid. That could very easily end up to be your parent next time around. What goes around comes around. So treat them a little different that way, a little more respect. Also, don't try to force them into the old paradigm. That's just not going to work anymore, because I was one of the first to say in '82 when I came back that jobs are over. There's never going to be as many jobs as there once was. That time is over in history. It's over. So what are we going to do? We're going to have to redefine human rights again, as we did with the laws of Hammurabi, the Magna Carta, and the Bill of Rights. And those of us that are still making money in these times, it seems like there's a schism beginning, but honestly, the wealthy are turning the money around in ways that are absolutely amazing. There's some great books out on it. One book is called Give to Live. See if you can find it. It studies all of the philanthropy on the planet, which is a new idea. You know, only in the human system do you have charity. Only in the human system do you have retirement. You don't retire in any other system. You become food at some point. The human system is already so graceful. Let me tell you, you have won the galactic lottery to be where you are right now. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a whole story. I got stories of what they were really about. I'll give you a short one on Rockefeller. In his time, he was considered like, really, really evil and bad. But if you look at the oversoul view, which looks at the mass potential, what Rockefeller did when he came in was that the world was lit on whale oil at that time. You haven't seen whale killing to before Rockefeller. You have not seen anything like the whale killing that was going on. The whole world lived off whale oil lamp because it was so clean. China included, everybody. Rockefeller comes in, and his job was to set up a new energy grid for the planet. He got the kerosene lamps going. All whales stopped dying in droves from then on. He got the train lines to build tracks all over the planet. He got the new energy, the higher energy form, from wood and coal to the higher energy form, because we're always going up in higher energies till we finally get free energy. And so he set up the grids on the planet that serve us to this day, to get energy from one point to the other. A higher energy form that helped the Industrial Revolution and helped us transcend, actually. Now, here's what's interesting. Everyone that worked with Rockefeller became rich. Those that didn't, he ruined. Interesting character. If you played with the program, you got rich. If you went against the program of Gaia, you didn't thrive. Now that's a whole other level of Gaia that's operating there. Now here's the other thing that happened. Remember the fractal geometry I showed here, where one image repeats itself endlessly but different? Your children are your fractal geometry. They're like you but different. They're the same as you but different. They come from you but they're different. You see, that's fractal geometry in the biological form. Now, Rockefeller's first fractal issue, his son, what did his son do with all his dad's money? Gave it back. Gave it back. Every penny. Isn't it wild?
But he also understood the energy of money.
Yeah.
In the Depression, somebody asked him, well, why don't you give away your millions? And he said, I could give away any minute. And
Right.
He knew he did.
Mm-hmm.
I could give away every cent I have, and within 10 minutes, I would have it back.
Exactly. These characters like Julius Caesar and others were like queen bees. They organized us workers to get a mission done, and then they become irrelevant. It's interesting. The masses is where the focus is always. And the other thing I learned too is that the genius is in the masses, it's not in the Einsteins. That's why Gaia doesn't produce a whole lot of Einsteins. We don't need them. We just don't need them, just occasionally. I know that in my business, I was saying earlier that we used to hire all the geniuses and we realized we don't need them. They get in the way after a while. We just need workmen to get the job done. We need very few geniuses to get this project going. So what you have is the genius of the masses that I've learned to respect. Whatever the masses are spending the most money on is what Gaia is interested in. Well, we can go on and on. Hitler, that's a long story, but let me tell you, he had a hell of a life review. But Hitler represented a cancer in the human psyche that was manifesting from the 1800s on in Europe. And if you study how World War I ended, you clearly understand why World War II happened. We raped Germany, the victors, all of us. We raped it. And I've got films of people with wheelbarrows full of money trying to get a loaf of bread in Germany before Hitler. The interesting thing is that Hitler became a millionaire before he was in office. Do you know how? Multi-millionaire, selling his book, Mein Kampf. But most of them were sold outside of Germany. To like Roosevelt, Churchill. These are the people that were empowering him. Isn't it wild? But what's interesting is that in a healthy system, this is a self-corrective system, so is a universe, that anytime there's a cancer, there's also going to be a healing. So what happened was, as he got rolling, he started making mistakes. Like he got rid of the Jews. Big mistake. Big mistake. They had the bomb. They had all the other stuff too. In other words, Gaia will not give the power. He was going on force of will. You see, but he represented a cancer, and the cancer will grow wildly. Now, when the cancer got big enough to threaten the body, all the T cells, which are the patriots, activated. And suddenly people are leaving their homes and their families to go fight Hitler, and even if they died. That's the T cell immune system of the planet activating. And when the immune system got activated, he didn't last very long, did he? You see what I mean? So, and there's many other levels of Hitler and the Holocaust, and which Holocaust are we going to talk about? The red, the yellow, the white, the black. I mean, how many Holocausts have there been? But it goes into several layers after that, because it wasn't just about Hitler, the war, but it was about everything but Hitler, actually. Hitler was just a metaphor for the stuff that humanity was going through that healed itself quite nicely, actually. And the tendency for war is not going to be there anymore because war has served incredibly good purposes over history. If you look at wars as an organism, anytime a society gets stuck or gets too powerful, they tend to attract enemies or disintegrators. It's the way the system works. No one or one system, whether it be religion, philosophical, or economic, will ever dominate this planet. It's impossible. It will not happen because it cuts off hybrid vigor. And what the planet is about is hybrid vigor being unlimited. So anytime you try to limit Gaia, you're in trouble. She's going to kick your butt. Anytime you try to be anything less than unlimited, you're going to get your butt kicked sooner or later. And aren't we learning that? The more narrow you are, the more problems you have. Also, forgive me for saying this. I know it's pretty wild, but Gaia is into race mixing as the number one thing, hybrid vigor. Race mixing is preferred by Gaia. Any race that does not want to mix with the rest of us will attract enemies historically because they think they're pure bloods. And purity does not last long in this universe. The universe is not about perfection, not about purity. It's about hybrid vigor and richness. So what you have as you look around is those that don't want to mix with the rest of us, whether they be the Aryans or whoever, they tend to attract enemies because it goes against the basic law of nature, hybrid vigor. It's an interesting concept. Now, the other byproduct of war, which we don't need it for anymore, is war. The first thing about war was race mixing. Very important to Gaia. All wars have led in a lot of race mixing, and I know Vietnam did too because I lived in a military town. Incredible amount of race mixing goes on during wars. Not only race mixing, but cultural mixing and assimilation. So the system actually in most cases has blossomed. You see what I mean? Egypt, if you'll study history, Egypt is the only society that ever controlled the world that long. Since then, each world dominator has had shorter and shorter time to dominate until you get up to Adolf Hitler, and then, well, Saddam Hussein was a joke, but basically, you get up to Hitler, what was it, 10 years, 5 years of actual activity? Bango, he's out of here. That's how organized we are now. In Egypt, when the population was much lower and had much less intelligence because they had less brain cells, very easy to dominate them. Very easy. Until the population grew. You see? That's what's keeping us really rich and healthy, is a growing population. Everybody that's born increases our own intelligence, and the more psychic you become.
The session continued for another 15 minutes or so, but we were unable to capture that on this tape. Therefore, we are concluding The Rainbow Bridge, Where Science and Spirit Meet, with Mellen Thomas Benedict.